deception, the institution of false narratives, requires censorship of alternative and competing narratives, which would expose the official narrative as a lie, or at least an inferior explanation. The deceiver will of course claim their narrative is true, and they are only censoring false narratives, to protect people from being deceived by those false narratives. But here is my point. If they were so sure their narrative was superior, and the others inferior, even false, deceptive, mendacious, then this superior argument would welcome open, free, public, independent, equally resourced discussion. A collaborative search for truth. An elenchus. A Socratic dialogue. Censorship denies the public the right to determine which narrative, explanation, they find most compelling. The stronger argument is always keen to engage with the weaker. It is only the weaker narrative, the weaker argument, the less compelling explanation, that seeks protection from being exposed as such. Such protection includes censorship, coercion to ensure self-censorship, and sanctions against free thinkers such as criminalization of competing narratives. The most obvious examples are the official Holocaust narrative and the official carbon-based climate crisis narrative, and the official virus narrative. These narratives are also weak, and fearful of exposure as inferior and deceptive narratives. They must resort to legal protections. They could never stand on their own 2 feet, and so must be artificially propped up. This is the very worst form of protectionism. It protects criminal conspiracies from being exposed. It protects lies from being exposed. It does not protect the public in any positive sense. It protects the criminals. There can be no representative democracy unless all political views, all opinions, all arguments, all narratives, are represented. Censorship starves democracy of its lifeblood. Its oxygen. Namely information. Access to all sides of every argument. Otherwise the ideal of informed consent is replaced with what the legal weasels call constructive consent, whereby tyrants dictate, and the public submit, out of fear of sanctions, and other forms of state violence. These tyrants often form professional organizations that can withhold and take away the right to practice that profession. What did the American Medical Association get, in 2012 values, for its $300 million lobbying activities in America? What did the pharmaceutical industry get for its similar investment? The only mandate that is legitimate is one granted under conditions of perfect freedom of information, and thus informed consent. Censorship and representative democracy are not compatible. Or to be more precise, censorship ensures the exclusive and exceptional representation of only the elites with the resources to lobby, in other words by political influence, so they can impose the narrative that they feel most benefits themselves, as the official narrative. The moment any particular narrative becomes the official narrative, and this state of affairs is normalized, then we will have dictatorship by official narrative. Things are rarely so clear-cut that any particular narrative has natural authority over all the others. So when it seems that there is only one compelling narrative, that is the time to start questioning that narrative, and identifying how it has been installed as the official narrative. And to start actively encouraging all those with alternative, competing, narratives, to express them, with state subsidies. Just as the Founding Fathers did immediately after they won the Revolutionary War. With the state distributing up to $30 billion each year in today's values, to ensure independent news reporting, journalism, and the mass media of the day, newspapers and journals. Information is the oxygen of democracy. Freedom of the press, of all forms of communication, of speech, and expression, is the lifeblood of democracy. You cannot have both democracy and censorship. There is no place for official narratives under representative democracy. There can only be the entertainment of alternative narratives, and narratives that are, for now, found to be more or less compelling, based on our current understanding of things.